Welcome to episode 13 of Carrying My Cross podcast. I'm Bill Tucker, and if you know me from my previous podcast, A Gamer Looks at 40, and even before then, you know that interviews were a crucial part of what I did. And actually on A Gamer Looks at 40, that's all I did. I interviewed a ton of people about their history with video games, about their personal stories, and kind of let those stories speak for themselves and tell the story of video games through people's personal history. That's a lot of P's there. And that's something I'd like to continue here on Carrying My Cross. I'd like to continue talking to people about their stories of faith and some cases lack thereof, because people's stories are important. I feel like they provide flavor and interest and intrigue and can also be interesting signposts into faith in general. So today we chat with Dillon Bruce. He is a TikTok / Instagram / Facebook creator. I saw him on my FYP on TikTok and immediately I'm like, man, I want to talk to that person. So I shot my shot and sure enough, he joined me for an interview. We talk about ministry, we talk about social media, we talk about faith, and everything in between. So let's just jump right into this conversation with Dillon Bruce here on episode 13 of Carrying My Cross podcast. Dillon, man, thank you so much for joining me to talk a little bit about what you do online ministry, faith, Jesus, all the good stuff. I've been watching your stuff on TikTok quite a bit. Mm-hmm. And you're one of those people where I saw you, I was like, man, I got to talk to this guy. And I'm a new show. So I'm kind of like shooting my shot a little bit, almost like I'm going to see if I can get, and sure enough, you did. So I appreciate you joining me today, man. Thanks for taking the time.
Absolutely. Yeah. I always try to, at least I try to, I don't know if I succeed at this super well, but I try to come across very conversational, even in all of the TikToks that I do. I also do a lot of stuff on Facebook and Instagram, but every video that I put out there, I want people to be able to feel like they can have a conversation with me. I don't want it to be like here's what I believe, and if you don't believe the same thing as me, then you're wrong. And I'm like, no, I don't have if I claim to have all the answers, then that would be incredibly arrogant. Yeah. And so I'm like, let's have a conversation about it.
Totally. So let's just start with there. Why don't you tell the people who don't know you or know what you do? What do you do online? Some of your online ministry stuff. You mentioned TikTok and Instagram and Facebook. Why don't you share a little bit about what you're doing online?
Yeah. So I try to make videos just about faith-based things as much as possible. Part of that is also family related and parenting my kids and raising my kids, making sure that culture isn't going to be the main influence in raising my kids, but instead I want to be the main influence. So I actually had a video that went kind of like semi-viral on Facebook. It was me sharing the gospel story through my 2-year-old daughter, where I kind of like told her what to say. Jesus died, and Jesus was buried. He rose again. He's coming again, and had her repeat all that. But like using the 2-year-old to say that resonated with people so much more than if I had just jumped on there and said it. But
I kind of love that. I love that.
Yeah, it was really cool. But just finding creative ways like that to get the gospel out there and talk about faith, talk about scripture, talk about Jesus. And sometimes I'll get into doctrinal things and like, okay, what do we believe about this? What does the Bible say about this? But I would say 75% of my videos are just, here's how to have a better prayer life. Here's how to be closer with God.
That's awesome, man. And that's one of the things where I personally so actually before we get into some of my personal stuff and kind of how I've connected with you in your work, I'd love to hear your story. Kind of, did you grow up in faith, grow up in the church? Let me hear a little bit of the testimony, if you don't mind.
Yeah. So my dad actually worked for the church my entire life growing up. I was born in 1998 in Lubbock, Texas, and my dad wasn't working for the church, I guess, then, but by the time I was 4 years old, he was. He was the what they called associate minister, or no, not associate minister. He was the congregational life minister, which basically means he did a little bit of everything. Sure. He was the worship leader. He worked with the college group. He worked with the involvement ministry, small groups, and just all sorts of different stuff. And so that was kind of my life, having my dad work for the church. I grew up in that. We were at the church building every time the doors were open, working in all sorts of different ministries from little kids to really senior adults. And I was around that a lot. And there was never really a time in my life where I was like, oh, I don't really like doing church stuff. Like even when I had baseball games on Sunday afternoons, or even sometimes like creeping into Sunday mornings, it was always I'll pack my baseball stuff, take it with me, like my uniform, and change right after church is done, and then we can run to the ball field. And so we told the coach, put me at the bottom of the lineup if you have to.
Wow.
But my testimony, in years past, I've thought I've got kind of a boring story. Like I've been in the faith my whole life. I've never had a moment where I haven't believed. I kind of use this idea with my own daughter that like she'll never have a time in her life where she does not know that Jesus won. And that's the same thing that's true for me. I never had a moment in my life where like I felt like my story was really cool and unique. It felt boring for a lot of time. And a couple of years ago, I realized like that's actually a really cool story.
Yeah.
Is that I never had a moment where I turned my back on God. I mean, obviously we've all sinned. I'm not like claiming that,
Of course.
but God has always been my number one. Like always a pursuing of Him, always a love and a draw to Him. And so when I was a sophomore in high school, I was baptized, and then when I got to be a senior in high school, that's when I kind of realized like, hey, my baseball career isn't going to make it to the MLB. So I wanted to work for the church, just like I've grown up and seen my dad my whole life. And so went off, got my Bible degree at Freed-Hardeman University in Henderson, Tennessee, which is the middle of nowhere.
Wow.
And have since moved back to Texas and have been working for the church for, I guess, going on 7 years now.
Wow. What do you do at your church?
So for 4 years, I was a youth minister, working just directly with the youth. And about 2 years ago, I moved to another congregation, and I'm the associate minister now, which is kind of like what my dad was doing. It's just a fancy way of saying I do a little bit of everything.
That's pretty cool. I like how it came full circle. And I really think it's important I think that's important to designate, because a lot of times when you hear stories of testimonies, I spent a lot of time in Celebrate Recovery. And so when you go to Celebrate Recovery, you hear stories that are just amazing and harrowing and that sort of thing. And I think a lot of people have that story that you have, where it's like, and I've heard that. I work with youth as well, not as a pastor or anything, but as a volunteer, as a leader. And I've had students come up to me say like, my testimony's boring. I grew up in church. I go to church. I love Jesus. I never kind of lost that. And I'm still in church. And I tell them, and my guys are seniors this year, so they're graduating. And I tell them, your story is still important. Like, it's still a special story. Even if there's no big drama to it, there's something very beautiful about maintaining faith in a world that's hostile to it. I think that's really cool. So
absolutely. I actually think, like, I don't want to say some stories are cooler than others.
Right.
But for those that grew up with faith, to be able to say, yeah, I didn't turn my back on my God. I think that's really, really powerful. And something that our young people actually need to hear more of is, like, I never turned my back on God, so you shouldn't either, rather than I went through the depths of sin and almost kind of glamorize sin. You know what I mean? And I think sharing that with young people is really important. And I never like to put like some stories in hierarchy and say like, oh, some are better than others. But sharing with our young people the idea that you don't have to have some crazy restoration back to the church is so powerful, because it's like hey, you don't have to go try out all of this sin in the world. I actually think that's kind of Solomon's point, is like, I did try it. Don't try it for yourself. And so then to hear the other side of, I never did, and you don't have to either, is kind of cool.
Is very powerful. And I really think that people need to hear that, because again, a lot of the testimonies you hear are these like big stories that, get lots of clicks on YouTube and things of that nature. But I think a simple story is a good one. I was going to ask, What helped you maintain, again, in a world that can be hostile to faith, what helped you maintain your connection to God? Was it something, because again, we live in the world, and the world's sometimes unkind to Christians, and there's definitely profit to be made off of sin, and all the rest of it. What allowed you to stay connected?
From a really young age, my parents made sure that they developed a genuine love for my God within me. Not just a, hey, we're doing this because this is Dad's job. Not just a, hey, we're doing this because we need to look like Christians, or we're doing this, when you start thinking of all the reasons that somebody might be a Christian, because I don't want to go to hell, or, because fill in the blank with anything else. It wasn't anything like that. But it was just we genuinely love our God. And I learned to love my Creator before I even got into college, and so like when there's a genuine love there, like I can't wait to talk to Him when I wake up in the morning. Like when I'm driving to work, I'll turn the radio on for maybe 2 minutes until my mind really clears up and gets the morning fuzz away, and then I get to talk to my God while I'm driving to work, and same thing when I'm driving home. Like there's a genuine I don't know. I don't know what I would do without Him, kind of thing,
It sounds like a real relationship. And that's what I'm getting from this conversation, is this genuine relationship. And the word I wrote down here is authenticity. Yeah. There seems like you had an authentic relationship with God very early. And I think that's so important for, people like me. I'm a parent. My son is 10 and my daughter's 5. So I'm a little further down the road than you are. Mm-hmm. But I hope they maintain that childlike innocence and wonder towards God, because what you just expressed is and I mean this with all sincerity, as a really good thing, a childlike wonder, like, wow, I can't wait to talk to God in the morning. That's awesome.
Just like that's a kid so cool. Like, I can't wait to see my mom and dad in the morning.
Yeah.
I mean, my 2-year-old does this. We've still got a monitor on her crib, but about 7 o'clock every morning, I hear her calling, Dad, 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 because she wants to see me. She wants to see her dad in the morning. And it's the same way. And I think that's what Jesus means when he's like, unless you become like little children, you're never going to enter the kingdom.
Yeah.
And I think there's so many applications to that. The idea of being like little children, the innocence, the dependence on a parent. But I think you're right. Childlike wonder is another one I can add to that list.
Yeah. And I think I never want to get to the point when Easter rolls around or Christmas rolls around and I hear the sermon again and packaged differently, but the same old story, and not feel that sense of awe and wonder. That's always something for me. Just to give you a little background, and if people have listened to the show, they've heard the testimony. I didn't grow up in church. Like, I grew up Roman Catholic, kind of sort of CE Catholic, as I would say, like, Christmas and Easter. CE? Christmas and Easter.
Okay. Okay.
Christmas and Easter, we would go to church, but it wasn't part of my upbringing. And I was an agnostic for 20 years. Like, I completely fell away. When I was 13, my mom was like, do you want to keep going to church? And I'm like, is it an option to not? And she's like, I don't have to take it.
I get to sleep in on Sundays.
I get to go and play Mario. This is great. I can stay home. That sounds great. So for me, I did a lot of the world stuff. I did the drinking and I did all the stuff that the world said was okay. That was what I was trying. The way I describe it is I had a God-sized hole in my heart I was trying to fill with all the other stuff. And I hope for my kids that they have your story. I don't want them to have my story. I hope they have your story where they say, I was always a believer, and I went to church and I still love Jesus and I'm still trying to follow Him. So I think there's something really cool about that you're still maintaining that. Switching gears slightly, you were a youth pastor. That's really cool. Mm-hmm. How did you enjoy working with youth in your time as a youth pastor?
I really love the youth. I think there is something about teaching young people, especially from my age. I'm only 27
Mhm.
right now. I'll turn 28 this year, but I've got kind of a fun uncle, a little like an older brother sort of relationship with a lot of teenagers, and
Mhm.
that allows me to. I don't know if it's teach them with more authority is the right word.
Mhm.
But it's kind of different than when I'm talking to my peers or even older members of the congregation. That
Sure.
I'm not going to talk to somebody in their 50s the same way that I'm going to talk to a teenager, but I can tell the teenagers, hey, a decade ago, I was sitting in your shoes and I've been through what you've been through. And I know the culture that you're going through right now. I know the temptations from school. I know, everything that they're possibly dealing with. And I can really just lay it out straight for them. Whereas with somebody in their 50s, I'm like, you've probably been a Christian longer than I've been alive.
Yeah.
And it kind of just, maybe I'm getting in my own head about all that, but it kind of draws me back a little bit from speaking with more authority. So that's why I really like working with the youth.
I think that's really great. And I like youth as well because the way I see it is if I had a youth group community when I was in high school, boy, would my life, because I had some tragedy when I was a senior in high school.
Mm,
And I've had a youth group community to like rally around me when bad things happened, and
yep.
my life would have made a completely different turn. Now, I wouldn't have the testimony I have. And of course, God's going to work through he makes, mountains out of our mistakes. He makes monuments out of those things.
Hmm.
But um, I think it's great. The way I see it is if I can help a student go to college with a bedrock of faith, like trusting God for their decisions. I don't know what that's one of the best things I think you can do for the kingdom because, you know, um, it's pretty amazing. So I think it's
Big
great.
time. The thing I really hit home with the youth is I tell them you have to own your faith.
Mm.
Like your faith, if it's your mom and dad's faith, that's
Yep.
what's driving you to go to church or to go to youth group. Then when you get to college, the first little stumbling block that Satan's throwing in your way, it's going to knock you off track. But if you have ownership of your own faith and say, no, this is what I believe because of me, not because so and so tells me to believe it, whether it's your parents, your friend, or any leader in the church. But if you believe it for yourself, then that's going to make a huge difference when you turn 18, when you leave the home. Just having that ownership of your faith.
Yeah, I always tell my students. I started telling them this when they were like freshmen, right before they started driving. I tell them, and in my church, just to give you a little background, you can move up with your students. So I've been with my guys since they were in third grade, and
That's cool.
yeah, it's really cool. And now they're seniors, and so some of my guys, obviously, students come in and
Hmm.
out. I tell them all the time. I say, figure out why you're here, because in a couple of years you go to college or even when you start driving, you don't have to go to church. You don't have to find a church community, and I feel like
Hmm.
sometimes when I say that, I'm almost like setting them up, but it's very similar to what you're saying. Find your reason to be here because
Yeah.
because eventually mommy and daddy aren't going to be dropping you off anymore. And you
Yeah.
better have a good reason to come here or else you're not going to.
Well, and
And I
that was one
think,
of the really
yeah.
cool things when I was working with youth directly for 4 years is there were a number of kids in that youth group that I was working with that became the driving force in their family to go to
Mm.
church, not like physically driving their family,
Yeah,
but it
yeah.
was like
Uh-huh.
they were telling mom and dad, "Hey, we've got to be there." And I'm like, "That's really awesome."
That's cool. That is very cool. I'm very blessed. And when my guys graduate, I'm gonna go right back in. And I already told the youth pastor, just slot me in somewhere. I don't know. I'll figure it. Put me in some place. Put me in, coach.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's really cool. That's cool. I mean, when we were juniors, junior year is the year traditionally where you get a lot of drop off. Our numbers actually
Mm,
went up slightly because they were inviting people
nice.
over. Like, hey, you gotta come to youth group. Come to Wednesday nights. Come to Tuesday nights. Come to do the things. That's
Yeah.
really really cool. Um, Moving quickly to your online stuff. How'd you get started with TikTok? How did you get started doing that stuff?
Oh man. So if somebody actually wants to fact check me on this and scroll all the way back to my first videos on my profile, they'll see some very embarrassing things. But I started back, I think it was around like 2021 or something.
Okay.
And TikTok was just getting popular with the young people. So I was like, hey, let me make some fun videos on here. And just, kind of goofing around, a day in the life of a minister working for the church kind of stuff. And
Nice.
so some of my videos on TikTok started popping off, whereas some of my videos on Facebook and Instagram were a couple hundred views. These first couple ones that I made on TikTok were like a couple thousand. And I was like, no way. Like, is TikTok like that easy to reach a broader audience? And we can talk about the algorithm a little bit. I don't know if your listeners
Sure.
are super interested in that at all, but the way the TikTok algorithm works is it's so much easier to reach a broader audience than on Facebook and Instagram. Facebook and Instagram are much more connected to who you follow. That's typically what you're going to see. But on TikTok, you can just find content from anybody, whether you follow them or not, a lot easier just on the FYP. Sure. And so I found like, wow, I can reach people that like I may not have the chance ever otherwise to talk about Jesus if I start doing some TikTok videos. And so it took me a couple of years to really get into like hey, I need to consistently do this, a couple of videos a week kind of thing. But once I got into it, then I was like, this is really cool. And so I guess that's just what started me with it, is I was like, it's just a new avenue. It's a new angle to take to share my faith.
It's funny. I always go back to what one of my heroes of the faith once said about digital ministry. And he said that if the Apostle Paul sitting next to you and saw this like internet computer, and he would be like amazed at the ability to all over it. Yep. He would be all like, you can like put a message out on this thing and have just random people see it.
Well, here's like, what I tell people is social media. It's the modern day marketplace. Like I think that was actually like Elon Musk's idea for X or Twitter, is making it like the modern day marketplace where people could come and share ideas and whatever. All social media is that way though. And so for the people that are like, oh, it's just a bunch of immoral things on social media, I'm like, yeah, but think about that. Like back in the first century, there were immoral things happening in the corners of the marketplace, just as there are immoral things happening in the corners of social media or the internet in general. But that doesn't mean that Paul and the other apostles and everybody else sharing their faith didn't go to the marketplace just because there were immoral things happening in the corners. Right. No, they just ignored that. It was just no, I'm not going to focus on that. I'm not going to have my attention drawn to that. Instead, I actually want to draw people's attention away from that and tell them about Jesus.
Yeah, and I always like to say social media, especially TikTok, will give you what you want. It'll give you what you linger on. And and I listen, I'm not perfect. I've lingered on things I shouldn't be lingering on, and sometimes get caught watching stupid things that I shouldn't be watching. But I always make a point to kind of cleanse the palate and say, oh no. Let's intentionally not do that. Let's focus on, okay, there's a sermon or there's a piece of a podcast.
It's so
let's stay on that
to clean up that algorithm. Like give it 5
really
minutes of you just like every single spiritually minded, Christ-centered content, and then all of a sudden that becomes your entire feed.
Because the algorithm wants to give you what you want because it wants you to stay. Yeah. And so I agree with you. I think a lot of people have negative connotations with TikTok and Instagram, especially TikTok for some reason in the church world. I think gets a bit of a bad rap. But again, I think it's really just depends on what you want and what you ingest, because it's going to give you what you want at the end of the day. So
and it's the same way for Facebook and Instagram to some extent. Just I feel like TikTok's algorithm works a little bit stronger in that way of giving you what you want.
Yeah, and the discovery is really great too. And that's how I discovered you. You just popped up on the FYP and I was like, well, this guy seems really, again, just engaging in your car most of the time. Just kind of like do a quick message. But they're
I have
good.
A 2-year-old here at the house.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I can totally understand that. But it's still, it makes... It's engaging content. It's simple. It's easy to digest. And you say a lot of really good things. Like it makes a lot of sense. You make really good points in a very quick, engaging way. So I recommend everybody check out your stuff because it is very good, very approachable content as you can tell here for sure.
Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah, man. A few weeks back, though, you got into I don't want to say hot water, or more about your thoughts on baptism, and I reached out to you with a genuine question, like, "Hey, I heard this. Yeah, I'm just curious," and you had a great answer for it. How has that been for you? How has that been for you? Kind of the community of TikTok and online engagement. Have you found it to be mostly positive? Have you been try to ignore the? Yeah. What's been your
It kind of goes back
experience?
and forth.
Sure.
It's really funny. The people that agree with me that baptism is essential
Mhm.
are really, really passionate about that, and they'll
Sure.
jump in the comments and argue. And the people that disagree with me that that baptism is not essential, like it's pretty crazy how strongly people will jump in and be like, "Oh, tell me how that works out with your works-based faith." And I'm like, I don't think it's a works-based faith, man. um, so I'll say everybody that has the courage to comment on a TikTok
Hmm.
video on either side are just as, I don't know if dogmatic is the right word to say, but
Hmm.
argumentative maybe. And so, yeah, there's just as much support as there is lack of support and disagreement. I feel like that's about 50-50, and people that comment on it
Okay.
are just as passionate on either side. So one thing I'll say to Christians everywhere is please stop having debates in comment sections. Whether
Mm.
it's my video or not, like, and I'm saying this in a way that actually hurts my engagement, because the more debates that I have in my comment section, the more that TikTok's going to push my video out there more.
Sure. Of
So
course.
debates are good for me as a creator, but it is really bad for people who do not know Christ to see
Mm.
just that kind of argument in videos. Like Jesus said that they will know us by our love, not they will know us by our heated debates in comment sections. And so it really breaks my
You're
heart when
right.
I see
Yeah.
people just being so passionate about their beliefs. And I'll tell people, like, I'm more than happy to have conversations, but let's take it to direct messages. Let's take it
Yeah.
offline. And not because I don't feel like I can't defend something publicly. I'd be more than happy to, jump on a podcast like this and talk
Yeah.
through whatever you want to talk through. Um, but I think it just is a really bad look when you start, telling people like, tell me how that's going to work out, and like
Hmm.
you're leading people to hell with what you think, and or even saying like, oh well, you call yourself a Christian but you haven't read your Bible and whatever, and I'm just like, guys, that's not a good look.
It's not. And I agree with you. And I think Christians, because again, we care so much and it's
Mm,
important stuff, right? And that's why I reached out to you
yeah,
in a DM. I was like, hey, I just want to get a little clarification on this thing you said. And it turns out we have a very similar feel on that topic, right? But I that's what I've something I do is I said I reached out to you directly and you responded and we had a neat little conversation about it and you gave me more context and I was like, oh, okay, we're basically saying the same thing just in different ways, which is a
yeah.
really good thing.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
I'll clarify. Like, I think in my video, I just kind of said it very plainly and very shortly. Like, yeah, baptism is
Yeah.
essential for salvation, and like there wasn't much context to the video, and so that's what
Hmm.
led a lot of people to comment on it. And basically, what I believe is that if you just say, "Yep, I believe," and it's kind of like a thought in your mind, or kind of just a feeling that you hold in your heart, but it doesn't lead to anything else, then I don't think that's the kind of faith that saves. That's
Yeah.
like faith in the truest sense. Even going back to the Greek language, faith is leads to action. Faith
Right.
drives you to action. Now, it's not the actions that save. That is works based faith, but faith drives you to action.
Right.
And then, as far as baptism goes, I don't think faith is a work, because you're not really working anything. You're not doing anything. It's being done to you. It's God's working in you as you're submitting to Him. So, anyways, with all of that being said, I'm not promoting like works-based faith.
Right.
Faith still saves. Baptism is putting your faith into action and saying, this is what I'm going to submit to. This is what I'm going to confess. This is, repentance is the same way, I think, as baptism. That it's like, I'm going to confess Christ. I'm going to repent. I'm going to be baptized because of my faith.
Right.
And if you don't do that, like if you aren't baptized, then do you really have faith? If you don't confess, do you really have faith? If you don't repent, do you really have faith? And so there's a whole bunch of verses from James to the way that Paul talks throughout the book of Romans that we can kind of put all of them together, and that's where I get the picture from.
Yeah, no, I think, I'm sorry, continue. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, and I was just going to say that once people start having that conversation with me, they're like, oh, well, yeah, I don't think that like faith can just be like a feeling that you hold in your heart. And I'm like, awesome, then let's put it to work.
Right. And that work, of course, comes from the leading of the Holy Spirit. And that work comes God working through us. And, the Bible is very clear on fruits of the Spirit. And there needs to be outward evidence of that faith. It's just going to happen naturally through God working through us as believers. And that's because God wants us to grow as human beings. He doesn't want us to stay stagnant. He doesn't want us to stay where we're at, because that would not be a loving thing. And at the end of the day, Jesus said to get baptized. So I don't know. I think listen to Jesus. I think that's a good idea. Again, not saying that, agreeing with you that it's not a saving act, but it is an act of obedience, and it's something that Jesus says, get baptized. Yes. When you get baptized, that's
one way I heard it phrased. Actually, Jace Robertson, one of the Duck Dynasty guys. I saw a video of him recently, and he said, like, Jesus gave his life. Like he died to give you life, and he gives you the option to do the same thing, to die to yourself. Why would you be like, you don't have to do that? It's like Jesus gives you the option to do what he did. Why would we downplay it? It just blows my mind.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So I think, again, it was just a good example of having a question and going to the person and saying, hey, I have a question about this. And I tell my students all this in youth group all the time. I tell them, keep having questions. Yes. Questions are good. I get concerned if a student's not asking questions and just kind of sitting there accepting.
Yep.
Because that's a sign of an active faith. This stuff's hard. There's a lot of questions, and questions are a good thing. So
yeah,
I always say, don't be afraid of it.
That keep us from asking questions is this popular deconstruction that happens within a lot of millennials, but even more so Gen Z, that people are deconstructing their faith. Rhett and Link made that really popular a couple of years ago. And so I think for solid Christians who they're like, I don't want to look like I'm falling away, they won't ask questions because they don't want to seem like they're deconstructing anything. And I'll tell people, like, deconstruction is not a bad thing, but you need to have a standard, and your standard has to be scripture. Like know what the truth is. And so when you ask questions, you can go back to where you can reference what is truth. And if you don't have a standard, then anything's up for grabs on tearing it down and deconstructing it. See, the important thing about like deconstruction is, like, if you're going to deconstruct traditions and know the difference between command and tradition all day long. Knock yourself out with that. Ask whatever questions you want to, but make sure you have a standard. And honestly, that's kind of how you go about owning your faith, is by asking questions and saying, like, hey, what is commanded? What is just tradition? And when you ask those questions, you take ownership of your faith.
I love that. And I also think if you're in a church, you should feel comfortable asking the teaching pastor questions, like, ask questions. Luckily I'm friends with one of the pastors who teach at my church, and he did a sermon. We're actually going through the entire book of Romans this year. Like, we're doing like literally verse by verse going through Romans over the course of like 10 months. It's so good. And we're almost done because we're getting towards the end of the spring, that kind of semester. Okay. And he was doing oh, what was it? He was talking about election, which I think is like Romans 8-ish, 8 or 9. I forget where, but he's talking about election, like the nature of election. Are we elected by God? And then that brings up this whole question of sovereignty versus free will.
Yep.
And he preached a message of, as he found in the Bible, there is a certain level of election that he sees. And my brain went like, oh no, we're not starting to teach like Calvinist stuff here. Are we? What are we doing here? So I asked him, and I actually stopped. He was on his way to pick up his kids, and I'm like, dude, I have to ask if you have a minute. And he's like, I don't. I'm gonna get back to you. And he did. And like that evening, he wrote me a whole thing, and we talked back and forth, and he made his point. And I said to him later, I'm like, did you get a lot of questions on that sermon? I gotta ask.
Oh,
and he's like, there was a few, but he had that standard, and I went to him and I asked him a question about it because I think that's important. I've done that with our youth pastor. I've asked him questions because I think that's important. We have to continue asking those questions as we kind of move forward in our faith. I think it's important.
Yeah, absolutely. Just to reiterate, because if you don't ask questions, then you're just going to end up going through the motions. Everybody asks questions. One of the best examples I give of this is Acts 17. Paul just had gone through Thessalonica. He gets to Berea, and what it says in verse 11 of Acts 17 is the Jews there in Berea. Paul goes to the synagogue to reason with them, and so the Jews there in that synagogue in Berea, they fact checked him. Like they were seen as more noble because they searched the scriptures daily to see if these things were so. I think that's ESV that I'm quoting from. But that means they're fact checking Paul. Like Paul is saying, hey, these Old Testament prophecies prove that Jesus is the Christ. And they're like, hold up 1 minute. We're going to turn there ourselves. We're going to look at ourselves. We're going to go home and study this tonight. And then we'll talk to you about it tomorrow. And they did that day after day. They examined the scriptures daily to see if these things were so. It's like Paul wrote the majority of the New Testament. And they're like, hold up. I don't believe you. I'm going to look at the word of God. And I'm like, that's awesome.
That's great. That's so good. I love that. I wrote that down. I'm going to read that later. That's really, really, that's fascinating to me. Yeah. People questioning Paul.
Yeah.
Good. And that's a good thing for sure. Let's see what else we got here. Again, magic of editing. Let's see. So that's that. I caught, speaking of you being in situations where you're asking questions, I caught you on that live last week.
Oh, which one?
You were talking to that. Oh, is that something you do often? Like pop on people's lives?
I mean, when I have time, and there were about 4 or 5 different ones that I got on last week.
I'm not brave enough. It was something to do with, it was a salvation something. I don't remember the actual context, but the guy was completely dismissive of you. Like he wouldn't even let you.
Oh, was it that African-American guy I was talking to? I think his name's Heretic Slayer.
Maybe. He kept saying to you, he kept telling you to frame your answer in like a certain way that was going to like trap you somehow. Yeah. I'm not brave enough to go on someone's live. I've not gone live yet on this TikTok account. On my other one I have, which was more video game related, because I'm a big video game dork.
Yeah. And
I've kind of put that show on the side to do this one that's just more kingdom focused. But I've not been brave enough to do that. Good for you. Yeah, that was awesome. That was wild. I see. I pop onto a live and there's Dillon, and I'm like, there's my man. And everybody in the chat, so for those of you who didn't see it, Dillon was on this live, joined somebody on a live, and he was answering a question, and the host would not let you answer the question. He would not let you. And you even said, like, this looks really bad for you. Like, this is not a good look for you, sir. Like,
yeah.
You tried. And his entire chat was like, go Dillon, go, who's this Dillon guy? You haven't let him say a word. You haven't let him talk.
Yeah, I think by the end of that, I don't know if he stuck around for the whole thing, but by the end of that, I got unmuted for like 2 seconds, and I was like, hey, if y'all want any more like discussion about this, y'all follow me, because he's not letting me get a word in, and then he muted me right away.
Yeah, and he kept muting you,
Yeah.
So it was... It was weird. And I love this concept of like the marketplace of ideas, right? The market, and the fact that you can, and again, talking more about social media and TikTok, that you can go on someone's live and have that conversation or attempt to. And,
at least
and
attempt
unfortunately, in some instances, not get anywhere. But that's good for you. Good for you that you're brave enough to do that.
Well, and the thing is, you can't take offense to anybody that is, treating you like they don't want to have a conversation. Like just like we started this conversation, where I'm like, yeah, I mean, I'm happy to talk to people. I don't want to really have an argumentative debate with anybody, but we'll just have a conversation. And I really tried to channel a little bit of Charlie Kirk energy, because I felt like he was always very respectful to people that he talked to, even if they had some of the wildest ideas, and that requires a lot of patience. And so I just try to have a lot of patience and just want to have a conversation so we can find truth, because truth is objective. Truth doesn't care about your opinion. It is truth. And so that means that it can be found. And so if truth can be found, then let's have just a rational debate about it, and leave our opinions, leave our biases, leave our feelings to the side. And that's not to say that your feelings don't matter, but in terms of finding what truth is, your feelings don't matter, like in the whole scheme of things. Like it matters how you feel in terms of how we should relate with each other, but it doesn't matter in terms of what is truth.
Yeah, and I like to say that your feelings are a great guide, but they're terrible drivers. Like, you don't want your feelings to take the wheel. It's no good at it. It's a decent GPS.
I love that saying. That's really good.
But boy, oh boy, don't let your feelings take the wheel, because you're not going to like where they take you, because it's going to go all over the place and go awry. Do you have any life verses that you particularly like, or any if I said if you had like a life verse, what would you say?
Colossians chapter 3, verses 1 through 4.
Okay.
It's speaking about setting your mind on eternal things, to focus on, to seek the things that are above, where Christ is seated at the right hand of the Father. And I think it's actually in verse 4 where it says, and Christ who is your life, when he appears, Christ who is your life, then you will appear with him also. So just in the context of the whole thing, I can't quote it, unfortunately, because I read it in so many different translations. It kind of just merges all together into one Dillon translation. And that's another side story of people ask me, what's the best commentary? And I'm like, 5 different translations of the Bible is the best commentary.
Check them all out, because there's differences.
Yeah, because when you read from ESV, New King James, NIV, and New American Standard, NLT, just combine them all together, you're going to get the clearest picture of what the original translation was. And so that's why what Colossians 3, 1 through 4, I'm like, okay, I know what the gist of it is, but I can't quote any one translation.
That's good.
But the idea is, if you have been raised with Christ, that's, if you are a born again in Christ, raised with him to walk in a new life, then your goal is to seek the things that are above. Set your mind on eternal things, that you no longer focus on physical things. And we see that reflected in the first Christians. I think it's Acts chapter 4. After the believers pray for boldness, at the end of that chapter, it talks about the traits of those believers, that they were all selling their property. Yeah, it's at the end of chapter 4, because chapter 5 is talking about Ananias and Sapphira. But at the end of chapter 4, they're talking about how they would all sell their property. Anybody that had land or any kind of property, they would sell it and give the proceeds, lay it at the apostles' feet, and they would distribute the money to anybody as any had need. And so there was not a needy person among them. And that's where we're first introduced to Barnabas. But the idea is, they're like, hey, if something's physical, why would I worry about it? Like if something's going to be burned up when Christ comes back again, why do I care about it? That's the idea of Colossians chapter 3, verses 1 through 4, is seeking the things that are above, setting your mind on the things that are above. Is I'm focused on eternal things that will still be around after Christ comes back, not something that's just physical. And then in verse 4 where it says, and then Christ who is your life. And I'm like, that's such an awesome phrase to think of it like Christ is my life. Like there is nothing more important. People will say like, oh, ball is life, or you know, you'll refer to different hobbies or things that you love as like, oh, that's life. Like that's just my life. And I'm like, no, Christ, who is your life. Like that's who is really important.
Yeah. I heard a pastor one time say that, I think I was talking to them and I said, yeah, I try to make Christ the first in my life. And he's like, no, that's not actually shouldn't be the case. And I was like, oh, what do you mean? And he's like,
Christ shouldn't be first. What
do you mean Christ shouldn't be first? And he goes, Christ should be the center. Everything should sprout from him, not first, center. And that was like a mind blowing. Okay. Wow. Good. Yeah. So and that's actually, I was actually,
and it's not that you ignore other responsibilities in life,
right.
but like spouses will treat each other the way that they're supposed to. Parents will treat kids the way that they're supposed to. Employees will treat employees the way they're supposed to. Friends will treat friends the way they're supposed to. Like every other responsibility in life just tends to work the way it should be when Jesus is at the center of it.
Yeah.
When Jesus is directing things, everything just works out.
Yeah, and I think there's something really beautiful about that because, again, just having Christ at the center, and again, it's an easier said than done thing. Trust me, I am not perfect at it, and I know nobody is, right? But the more I have him at the center, the more that I'm in my word and in the Bible and praying on a regular basis, I feel like more centered. It's just how it works, and it's how it was designed to work. It's how it's supposed to work, you know. So one thing I think was very interesting, how you said a lot of your content's really focusing on prayer life. What advice would you have for somebody who struggles with prayer, who struggles with doing it daily, who really struggles with the notion of it? What advice would you give somebody who's in that situation?
Okay, somebody that struggles with the notion of it, like the idea of like, oh, is there anybody out there? I just feel like I'm talking to an empty room kind of thing.
More of just consistency, I think. Consistency.
Okay.
And just making it part of a daily regimen as opposed to a checklist of like, oh, I'm going to do my prayer time today. Like, it sounds like prayer is a very important thing to you.
Yeah. So start with praying a bunch of little prayers, like just little tiny, like mini prayers, MINI prayers all day long, where like you're just sitting in line somewhere waiting for lunch or at the fast food line. Say a 10-second prayer and thank God for your lunch. If you're at a stoplight on the way to work, then say a little prayer thanking him for the vehicle that you're driving. Always be minded of what God has given to you, and understanding that you haven't earned anything yourself, but God has blessed you with everything from your time to your money to your energy. God is the one that has given it to you. And before you're like, wait, no, that's my time. Then I'm like, okay, did you make the sunrise today? Nope, didn't think so. It's God's time. He gave it to you. And so just say a bunch of little tiny mini prayers and get comfortable with the idea of I'm talking to God consistently. Best example of that I found for this is a couple years ago, my wife and I were just wrapping up a youth event and had one of the teens come over to our house because her parents were late picking her up. And so we're like, oh, you can just come hang out with us, chill at the house. They can come get you later. And so she popped in her AirPod and was talking to her friend on the phone and just laid her phone down, but was talking to her friend on her AirPod. And I was like, oh, that's kind of fun for her to do as a teenager, whatever. And a couple hours later, it was like 2 hours later, I was like, hey, your parents are almost here. Why don't you grab your stuff? And she said something to her friend. It was like, okay, I'm about to get in the car with my parents. And I was like, you're still talking to your friend? Like, did you hang up, call him back? Like, what's going on? And she goes, oh, no, we've just been talking. And I'm like, I've been walking around the house doing the dishes, working on different stuff throughout the house. And I have not heard you talking. Like, what are you doing? And she goes, oh, no, we just keep each other on the phone all day long. So if we have a thought that pops in our mind, we can just start talking and they're automatically right there in our ear. And I'm like, that's the way that prayer is supposed to be, is that you start a prayer with God in the morning and you just never hang up.
That's so good. I love that. It's I think it's 1 Thessalonians 4:17, which is pray without ceasing.
Pray without ceasing. Yep.
And what I love about that verse is that it's not God saying you need to be a monk and you need to spend hours a day prostrate, but like you're saying, these little prayers, like these little touch points to a God who wants to hear them. I love that. That is so good.
Yeah. Well, and here's what I tell people is any relationship that you have in life, whether it's a boyfriend, girlfriend, whether it's your husband or your wife, or just friends like bros, all of them are built on communication. You communicate at some level. Like bros will communicate differently than husband and wife, but it's still
Right.
communication nonetheless. But every relationship is built on communication. Why do you think you could have a relationship with God if you're not communicating to Him?
Yeah. That's so true. That's so true. And the amazing thing is God's waiting to have that conversation. And that's so incredible to think about, that the God of the universe wants to have a genuine conversation with you. Just wants.
I know.
And I think some of the most powerful prayers that I've ever had have been when I don't have anything to say. When I just go to God, I'm like, I got nothing. I have 5%, but I'm going to give you 100% of my 5%. You're going to get all of it right now. And I don't have much. I don't have anything fancy.
That's when the Spirit intercedes on your behalf with groanings that we don't even understand. And He starts talking to God on your behalf.
Whew. Boy, oh boy.
That's so cool to me.
That is cool. That is super cool. With a little bit of time we have left, again, thank you so much for taking the time. I appreciate it. And sorry for the technical difficulties. I promise I'll be able to stitch it together. It'll be seamless, I'm sure, hopefully.
Okay, awesome.
If not, it's all good. You as a creator have almost 10,000 followers, which is amazing to think about. I'm just looking at your stat right now, about 10,000 followers, about 100,000 likes. What advice would you give to somebody who's starting out in digital ministry? And I'm going to put it that way because it doesn't have to be TikTok. It could be a YouTube channel. It could be whatever digital ministry happens to be. What advice would you give for somebody who's just starting out in that realm?
Oh, man. That's a great question. I don't feel like I'm super experienced in all of this. All I do is I just open up my phone with a connection to the internet and I'm like, okay, what is on my mind today? And sometimes it's about prayer. Sometimes it's about the importance of studying our Bible. Sometimes it's hey, here's a little doctrinal thought that is not super popular, but I want to share it. So I would just say whatever is on your heart, share it, because that's what's going to resonate the most with people, is when they can tell, hey, you're really actually passionate about this. You're going to show much more authenticity. You're going to be more genuine. Is when it's just something that's on your heart. It's something that you're passionate about, and preach the word.
Preach the word. That's it. Awesome, man. Thanks once again to Dillon for joining me on episode 13 of Carrying My Cross podcast. If you haven't done so already, check out the previous 12 episodes. I do bits and features, and I'm going through a study of all of the 3:16s in the Bible. Spoiler alert, the early ones are not that interesting, but I think good conversation comes from it. So go ahead and check all of that out at your leisure. Once again, thanks again to Dillon for joining me for this interview. And thank you for checking out this edition of Carrying My Cross podcast. And until next time, stay blessed, stay connected, and stay prayerful to our Heavenly Father above. Have a great week, y'all.